My name is Crystal Bennett. I'm 29 years old, and I just discovered that my entire family used my identity to secure an $890,000 mortgage on their dream house, moved into their luxury mansion, and expected me to quietly accept financial responsibility for their mortgage fraud while they celebrated their success with elaborate parties for 200 guests. What they didn't know was that their massive federal crime was about to cost them everything they had stolen, plus their freedom, when the mortgage fraud investigators I had been working with finally moved in for arrests that would destroy their fraudulent paradise forever. I've spent the last 6 years working as a senior bank manager at First National Trust, where my expertise in mortgage lending and credit analysis has made me one of the youngest managers in the bank's history. My meticulous approach to financial management has earned me not just professional success, but also a pristine credit score of 847 and a spotless financial record that banks consider the gold standard for creditworthiness. My dedication to financial excellence isn't accidental. It's the result of years of disciplined choices and strategic planning that began in college when I studied finance and banking. I've never missed a payment on anything, never carried credit card debt beyond what I could pay off monthly, and never made financial decisions based on impulse or emotion rather than careful analysis of long-term consequences. This financial discipline has allowed me to build genuine wealth at a young age, while maintaining the kind of credit profile that opens doors to the best interest rates and lending terms available. I own my own modest but beautiful condominium outright, drive a reliable car that I purchased with cash, and maintain emergency funds that could support me for over a year if necessary. My approach to money has always been methodical and conservative, informed by my professional understanding of how quickly financial situations can deteriorate when people make poor credit decisions. I've seen hundreds of mortgage applications from people whose financial lives were destroyed by impulsive spending, identity theft, or fraud, and I've made it my mission to protect myself from ever experiencing those kinds of devastating financial consequences. But what I never anticipated was that my own family would view my financial success and pristine credit as resources they could exploit without my knowledge or consent. The Bennett family has always struggled financially, living paycheck to paycheck while accumulating debt and making poor credit decisions that limited their access to quality housing and financial opportunities. My father, Dennis Bennett, has worked in construction his entire adult life, but his inconsistent employment history and poor financial management have resulted in a credit score that hovers around 480. My mother, Sharon, works part-time as a retail clerk, and her financial habits mirror my father's approach of spending whatever money is available without considering long-term consequences or building emergency reserves. My brothers Tyler and Justin, ages 26 and 24 respectively, have inherited our parents' attitudes about money and credit. Tyler works sporadically in various sales positions, but has never maintained steady employment long enough to build meaningful savings or establish good credit. Justin is still in college, but already has substantial student loan debt and credit card balances that he manages irresponsibly. The family dynamic has always been clear. I'm the responsible daughter who achieved financial success through careful planning and discipline, while everyone else lives more spontaneously and struggles with the consequences of poor financial decisions. During family gatherings, they would openly discuss their financial problems and express frustration about being denied for loans or forced to accept high interest rates because of their damaged credit histories. It's not fair that some people get all the good credit while the rest of us are stuck with high interest rates and rejections, Dennis would complain during family dinners. Crystal got lucky with her credit score, but that doesn't help the rest of us when we need to buy a house or get a decent loan. The resentment in his voice was always unmistakable, as if my excellent credit was the result of luck rather than years of responsible financial behavior. He treated my success as something that should somehow benefit the entire family, rather than recognizing it as the natural consequence of disciplined choices and hard work. My mother would often join these conversations with suggestions that felt increasingly inappropriate as my financial success grew. "Crystal, you have such good credit and such a high income," Sharon would say. "Maybe you could co-sign for a mortgage so we could finally get the house we deserve. We've been renting for 20 years, and we're tired of not building any equity." The pressure to use my credit to help family members achieve their financial goals had been building for several years, but I had consistently declined to co-sign for loans or mortgages. I understood from my professional experience that co-signing essentially makes you responsible for someone else's debt, and I wasn't willing to risk my financial security for people who had demonstrated poor money management throughout their lives. I can't co-sign for a mortgage, I would explain during these conversations. If you can't qualify based on your own credit and income, then you're not ready for home ownership. I'd be risking my financial security if something went wrong with your payments. My refusal to enable their poor credit situations with my own financial strength had created ongoing tension in our family relationships. They saw my reluctance to co-sign as selfishness, while I saw it as necessary protection of my hard-earned financial stability. Have you ever felt like your family resented your success, rather than celebrating it? That's exactly how I felt during most family interactions, where my achievements in banking and personal finance were treated as resources that should be available to solve other people's financial problems, rather than accomplishments that deserved respect and protection. What I didn't realize was that my family's frustration with their credit limitations and my refusal to co-sign had led them to develop a plan that would exploit my financial success without requiring my consent or cooperation. They had been quietly gathering my personal information and planning to use my identity to achieve the homeownership they felt they deserved, regardless of the legal and financial consequences for me. The first sign that something was seriously wrong came 6 months ago when I received a piece of mail that made no sense in the context of my actual financial situation. A mortgage payment notice for $4,147 arrived at my condominium address, showing that I apparently owed this monthly payment on an $890,000 mortgage for a property I had never seen or heard of before. My initial assumption was that this was some kind of administrative error or identity theft by strangers, since I owned my condominium outright and had never applied for or received any mortgage in that amount. I immediately called the mortgage company to report what I assumed was a mistake in their records or a case of someone else's information being confused with mine. Ms. Bennett, the customer service representative said after looking up the account. I show that you have an active mortgage with us for $890,000 on a property located at 1247 Oakwood Manor Drive. The loan was originated 4 months ago, and you're currently 2 months behind on payments, which is why you received this notice. The information was so completely wrong that I initially thought there must be multiple people with similar names causing the confusion. There's definitely been a mistake, I told the representative. I don't have a mortgage with your company. I've never applied for a mortgage in that amount, and I've never even heard of that address. Someone else's information must have gotten mixed up with mine. I understand your confusion, the representative replied, but I have your social security number, employment information at First National Trust, and income documentation that was used to qualify for this mortgage. The application shows your signature on all the loan documents, and the employment verification shows your position as senior bank manager with an annual salary of $127,000. The specific and accurate details about my employment and income made my blood run cold. This wasn't a simple case of mistaken identity or random identity theft. Someone who had access to my personal information had used it to apply for and receive a mortgage that I had never authorized or even known about. Can you tell me what address this mortgage is for? I asked, dreading the answer, but needing to understand the scope of what had happened to my financial identity. The property is located at 1247 Oakwood Manor Drive in the prestigious Oaks subdivision, the representative said. It's a 5-bedroom, 4-bathroom home that was purchased for $890,000 with a 10% down payment. The mortgage is for $801,000 with a monthly payment of $4,847, including taxes and insurance. I wrote down the address while trying to process the magnitude of what someone had done using my identity. An $890,000 house purchase represented the largest financial transaction of my entire life, except that I had never participated in this transaction or even known it was happening. After ending the call with the mortgage company, I immediately contacted the credit monitoring services that I used to track any changes to my credit report. What I discovered made the situation even more serious and complicated than I had initially realized. The mortgage inquiry and subsequent loan appeared on my credit report as if I had personally applied for and received the financing. But more disturbing was the fact that someone had successfully used my social security number, employment information, and forged signatures to convince a mortgage lender that I was personally responsible for this massive debt. My next step was to drive to the address that the mortgage company had provided, hoping to understand who was living in the house that I was apparently financially responsible for. The 35-minute drive to prestigious Oaks took me through increasingly expensive neighborhoods until I reached a gated community with luxury homes that were clearly in the upper tier of the local real estate market. When I found 1247 Oakwood Manor Drive, I sat in my car staring at one of the most beautiful houses I had ever seen. It was a massive 5-bedroom colonial with professionally landscaped grounds, a 3-car garage, and the kind of architectural details that indicated custom construction and premium finishes throughout. But what made my heart sink and my stomach clench with dread was the sight of my father's pickup truck in the driveway, along with my mother's SUV and Tyler's car. My entire family was living in the house that someone had purchased using my stolen identity, which meant that the someone who had committed mortgage fraud was not strangers, but my own parents and brothers. Have you ever had a moment when your understanding of your family shifted so dramatically that you felt like you were meeting them for the first time? That's exactly what happened, as I realized that the people I trusted most in the world had committed major financial crimes using my identity and expected me to bear the consequences while they enjoyed the benefits. I sat in my car for almost an hour, watching my family move around inside their new luxury home, while processing the reality that they had stolen my financial identity to purchase a house worth nearly $1 million. The betrayal was so complete and devastating that I initially couldn't even formulate a plan for how to confront them or protect myself from the legal and financial consequences of their crimes. The decision to approach the house and confront my family about their mortgage fraud was one of the most difficult I had ever made, knowing that the conversation would permanently change our relationships and potentially destroy whatever trust remained between us. But I also understood that mortgage fraud was a serious federal crime that could result in criminal prosecution for both the perpetrators and potentially the identity theft victim if I didn't take immediate action to protect myself. I walked up to the front door of the house that had been purchased with my stolen identity and credit, rang the doorbell, and waited to see how my family would react to being caught in the middle of their elaborate fraud scheme. Dennis answered the door with a huge smile and an expression of pride that suggested he was excited to show off their new living situation. "Crystal, what a wonderful surprise. Come in and see our new house. It's absolutely perfect, and we've been meaning to invite you over to see everything we've accomplished." The casual way he welcomed me into the house that had been purchased using my stolen identity was breathtaking in its audacity. He was acting as if their mortgage fraud was a legitimate achievement that I should celebrate rather than a serious crime that was destroying my financial security and potentially my banking career. "Dad," I said, following him into the spacious foyer with marble floors and a crystal chandelier. "We need to talk about how you were able to afford this house. I received a mortgage payment notice today for $4,147 per month on a property that I never applied for or authorized." The pride in Dennis's expression shifted to defensiveness as he realized that I had discovered their fraud scheme. "Oh, that," he said dismissively. "We needed better credit to qualify for the house we deserved, and you have the best credit score in the family. We knew you'd understand once you saw how perfect this place is for all of us." The casual admission that they had used my credit without permission while expecting me to understand and approve was so shocking that I initially couldn't respond. He was treating identity theft and mortgage fraud as family collaboration rather than serious federal crimes. Sharon appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel and smiling as if this was a pleasant family visit rather than a confrontation about financial crimes. "Crystal, honey, come see the kitchen. It has granite countertops, professional-grade appliances, and an island that's perfect for entertaining. We've been cooking so much more now that we have a proper kitchen." The enthusiasm in her voice suggested that she genuinely expected me to be happy about their new living situation, rather than horrified by the mortgage fraud they had committed using my identity. They were treating their crime as a family success story that I should celebrate. "Mom," I said, "how exactly did you qualify for a mortgage on this house? I know Dad's credit score is around 480, and your combined income wouldn't support a monthly payment of almost $5,000. Sharon's smile faltered slightly as she realized that I was asking questions about the specific details of their mortgage fraud rather than simply admiring their new home. "Well, we used some creative financing strategies," she said evasively. "We had some help with the credit and income qualifications." "Creative financing strategies?" I repeated, my voice rising as the euphemistic language revealed how they were thinking about their crimes. "Mom, that's called identity theft and mortgage fraud. You used my social security number and employment information to apply for a mortgage without my knowledge or consent." Tyler and Justin emerged from other parts of the house, clearly curious about the conversation they were overhearing from the living room. Both of them looked comfortable and settled in their new environment, suggesting that the entire family had been living in the fraudulently obtained house for some time. "Hey, Crystal," Tyler said cheerfully. "What do you think of our new place? It's incredible, right? We each have our own bedroom and bathroom, plus there's a game room downstairs and a 3-car garage. It's everything we ever dreamed of having." The casual way he was discussing their living situation while I was confronting them about mortgage fraud showed how little any of them understood about the seriousness of what they had done or the legal consequences they were facing. "Tyler," I said, "this house was purchased using my stolen identity. I'm legally responsible for a $890,000 mortgage that I never applied for, never signed, and never authorized. Do you understand that this is a federal crime that could result in prison time for everyone involved?" The mention of federal crimes and prison time seemed to finally get their attention in a way that my questions about mortgage qualifications had not. The casual celebration of their new home was replaced by uncomfortable silence as they began to understand that I was not going to simply accept responsibility for their mortgage fraud. Dennis stepped forward, his voice becoming more aggressive as he realized that I wasn't going to be cooperative about their scheme. "Crystal, you're being dramatic about a simple family arrangement. We needed better credit to get the house we deserved, and you have credit that you never use for anything important. We're family, and families should help each other achieve their dreams." "Dad," I replied, "using someone's identity to commit mortgage fraud isn't a family arrangement. It's a federal crime. You forged my signature, used my social security number without permission, and made me legally responsible for debt I never authorized. That's not helping family. That's destroying my financial future to benefit yourselves." The conversation continued for over an hour, with my family alternating between justifying their fraud as family cooperation and minimizing the seriousness of their crimes. They had completely convinced themselves that using my identity was acceptable because we were related, and they expected me to accept financial responsibility for their mortgage because I could afford it better than they could. But what they didn't understand was that their mortgage fraud wasn't just a family financial arrangement that we could work out privately. It was a federal crime that was already under investigation by mortgage fraud specialists who would soon be knocking on their door with handcuffs and search warrants. What my family didn't know as they tried to convince me to accept responsibility for their mortgage fraud was that I had immediately contacted federal authorities after receiving the fraudulent mortgage payment notice. As a bank manager with expertise in mortgage lending, I understood that identity theft for mortgage purposes falls under federal jurisdiction and carries severe criminal penalties that can't be negotiated away through family discussions. My first call had been to the Federal Trade Commission's identity theft hotline, where I reported that someone had used my social security number and employment information to obtain a mortgage without my knowledge or consent. The FTC representative explained that mortgage fraud involving identity theft is investigated by multiple federal agencies, including the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit and the Department of Housing and Urban Development's Office of Inspector General. "Ms. Bennett," the FTC investigator explained, "mortgage fraud cases involving family members are actually quite common, and the relationship between the victim and perpetrator doesn't reduce the seriousness of the crime. Identity theft is identity theft, regardless of whether it's committed by strangers or relatives." I was then connected with Special Agent Maria Rodriguez from the FBI's White Collar Crime Division, who specialized in mortgage fraud cases involving identity theft. Agent Rodriguez explained that my case had several factors that made it particularly serious from a federal prosecution standpoint. The amount of the fraudulent mortgage puts this case in the category of major financial crimes, Agent Rodriguez said. An $890,000 mortgage fraud represents a substantial loss to the lending institution and creates significant potential liability for the identity theft victim. We take these cases very seriously. Working with Agent Rodriguez, I began documenting every aspect of my family's fraud scheme while appearing to be shocked and uncertain about how to proceed. The goal was to gather comprehensive evidence of their crimes, while they continued to believe that our family relationship would protect them from serious legal consequences. My banking background proved invaluable in understanding exactly what documentation would be needed to build a strong federal case. I obtained copies of all the fraudulent mortgage documents, employment verification forms, and credit applications that had been submitted using my stolen identity. I also requested recordings of phone calls between the mortgage company and whoever had impersonated me during the application process. Your family was quite sophisticated in their fraud scheme, Agent Rodriguez observed as we reviewed the evidence. They had access to detailed personal information, including your employment history, salary information, and enough biographical details to successfully impersonate you during the mortgage application process. The sophisticated nature of their fraud scheme suggested that they had been planning this identity theft for months or possibly years, gathering information and preparing to use my credit and income qualifications when the right opportunity arose. This wasn't an impulsive decision. It was a carefully planned federal crime. But the most damaging evidence came from my family's own behavior and statements after I discovered their fraud. I began recording conversations during family visits, where they openly discussed their use of my identity and their expectations that I would accept financial responsibility for their mortgage. We knew Crystal would never agree to co-sign for a mortgage, Dennis said during one recorded conversation. So we decided to handle the credit application ourselves. She has excellent credit that she never uses for anything important, and we needed that credit score to get the house we deserved. The recorded admissions of deliberate identity theft and mortgage fraud provided federal investigators with clear evidence of criminal intent and premeditation. My family was essentially confessing to federal crimes while assuming that our relationship would protect them from prosecution. Sharon's statements were equally incriminating. Crystal makes good money and has perfect credit, she said during another recorded conversation. She can afford the mortgage payments better than we could have if we had qualified on our own. It all worked out perfectly. We got the house, and she can handle the financial responsibility. Have you ever listened to people casually discuss committing serious crimes against you while expecting you to be grateful for the opportunity to be victimized? That's exactly what I experienced as my family openly discussed their mortgage fraud scheme, while expecting me to accept the financial and legal consequences of their actions. The federal investigation moved quickly once Agent Rodriguez had access to the comprehensive evidence I had gathered. Bank records showing the fraudulent application, forged signatures that clearly didn't match my actual signature, and recorded confessions created an overwhelming case for federal prosecution. We have more than enough evidence to secure convictions on multiple federal charges, Agent Rodriguez told me 6 weeks after I first reported the identity theft. Your family will be facing charges for mortgage fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and potentially bank fraud depending on how the grand jury views the evidence. The federal charges carried potential prison sentences ranging from 5 to 30 years, depending on the specific counts and the defendant's cooperation with the investigation. These weren't state-level crimes that might result in probation or community service. They were serious federal felonies that would result in real prison time. Meanwhile, my family continued living in their fraudulently obtained mansion while hosting elaborate parties and social gatherings to celebrate their new lifestyle. They had no idea that federal agents were monitoring their activities and building a comprehensive case that would soon result in arrests, asset forfeiture, and prison sentences. The irony of watching them celebrate their success while federal investigators prepared to destroy their lives was both satisfying and heartbreaking. They had committed serious crimes to achieve a lifestyle they couldn't afford, and they were about to lose everything, including their freedom. 3 months after discovering their mortgage fraud, I learned that my family was planning their largest celebration yet. A massive housewarming party with over 200 guests to showcase their beautiful home and successful lifestyle to the entire community. They had no idea that their party was about to become the scene of their arrest for federal crimes. The housewarming party that my family planned was supposed to be their moment of triumph, a grand celebration where they could showcase their beautiful home and successful lifestyle to friends, extended family, neighbors, and community members who had known them during their years of financial struggle. They had invested weeks in planning an elaborate event with professional catering, live entertainment, and decorations that would impress their 200-plus guests. I learned about the party through a Facebook invitation that Madison, my sister-in-law, had posted in a family group. The invitation featured professional photographs of their stunning home with text that read, "Join the Bennett family as we celebrate our beautiful new home and the American dream achieved through years of hard work, sacrifice, and smart financial planning." The description of their mortgage fraud as smart financial planning was both infuriating and amusing, since their planning had consisted of stealing my identity and committing federal crimes. But the public nature of their celebration would provide the perfect opportunity for federal agents to execute the arrest warrants that had been prepared based on the evidence I had helped gather. Agent Rodriguez contacted me 2 days before the party to coordinate the timing of the arrests with their celebration. "We want to execute the warrants when all the family members are together and when we can maximize the impact of seeing the consequences of mortgage fraud," she explained. Public arrests send a strong message to other potential mortgage fraud perpetrators. The plan was for federal agents to arrive during the peak of the party, when guests were gathered, and the family was actively celebrating their fraudulent lifestyle. The timing would ensure that the maximum number of people witnessed the arrests, while also allowing agents to seize evidence and document the lifestyle that had been funded through identity theft and mortgage fraud. On the evening of the party, I drove to prestigious Oaks and parked across the street from the house that had been purchased with my stolen identity. The scene was exactly as elaborate as I had expected, with valet parking attendants, professional landscaping lights, and a steady stream of well-dressed guests arriving to celebrate my family's achievement. I could see through the large windows that the interior was beautifully decorated for the party, with floral arrangements, professional catering stations, and a live jazz ensemble performing in the main living area. My family had spared no expense in creating an impressive celebration of their new lifestyle and home. Dennis was standing near the front entrance greeting guests and clearly enjoying his role as the successful homeowner who had achieved the American dream. He was wearing an expensive suit that I had never seen before, and was shaking hands with guests while gesturing proudly toward various features of the house and grounds. Sharon was playing the role of gracious hostess, moving through the crowd with champagne and appetizers while accepting congratulations on their beautiful home and successful lifestyle. She was wearing jewelry and clothing that represented a significant upgrade from her usual appearance, suggesting that their mortgage fraud had funded more than just housing expenses. Tyler and Justin were also dressed in expensive clothing and were clearly enjoying the attention and admiration they were receiving for living in such an impressive home. They were giving tours of the house to interested guests, pointing out luxury features and talking about their family's hard work and financial success. The party was in full swing when I received a text message from Agent Rodriguez. "Agents are in position. Warrants will be executed in 5 minutes. Thank you for your cooperation in this investigation." I watched from my car as several black SUVs with government plates pulled up to the house, followed by local police vehicles that positioned themselves to block the driveway and prevent any attempts to flee. Federal agents and FBI windbreakers emerged from the vehicles and approached the front door with search warrants and arrest warrants. The music stopped abruptly when agents entered the house, and I could see guests gathering near windows and doorways to understand what was happening. The festive party atmosphere was immediately replaced by confusion and concern as federal agents began announcing their presence and purpose. "Federal agents, we have search and arrest warrants for Dennis Bennett, Sharon Bennett, Tyler Bennett, and Justin Bennett in connection with mortgage fraud and identity theft." Agent Rodriguez's voice carried clearly across the neighborhood as she addressed the crowd of party guests. The transformation from celebration to federal crime scene was dramatic and immediate. Guests began moving toward exits while trying to understand what they were witnessing, while my family members were separated and read their rights before being placed under arrest in front of everyone who had come to celebrate their success. Dennis was handcuffed near the front entrance, where he had been greeting guests just minutes earlier. His expensive suit and confident demeanor were replaced by shock and panic as he realized that their mortgage fraud scheme had been discovered and was being prosecuted by federal authorities. Sharon was arrested in the kitchen, where she had been serving appetizers to guests. Her role as gracious hostess ended abruptly as federal agents placed her in handcuffs while explaining the charges related to identity theft and mortgage fraud. Tyler and Justin were arrested upstairs while giving house tours to impressed guests. The brothers, who had been proudly showing off their luxury bedrooms, were handcuffed and led downstairs past the remaining party guests, who were now witnessing the consequences of federal crimes. The contrast between the celebration they had planned and the arrests they were experiencing was stark and powerful. The party that was supposed to showcase their successful achievement of the American dream had become a public demonstration of how mortgage fraud destroys lives and families. Have you ever watched people's dreams turn into nightmares in real time? That's exactly what I witnessed as my family's fraudulent celebration became the scene of their arrest for serious federal crimes that would result in prison sentences and the loss of everything they had stolen. As federal agents led my family members to waiting vehicles and handcuffs, other agents began executing the search warrant that would document their fraudulent lifestyle and seize assets that had been obtained through their crimes. The beautiful home that had been purchased with my stolen identity would soon be empty and scheduled for government auction. The aftermath of my family's arrests during their housewarming party unfolded over the following months in ways that completely vindicated my decision to cooperate with federal investigators rather than accepting responsibility for their mortgage fraud. The evidence gathered during the search of their home, combined with the financial records and recorded confessions I had provided, resulted in a comprehensive federal prosecution that made headlines in our local community. The search warrant execution revealed the extent to which my family had been living beyond their means, using the fraudulent mortgage and additional credit accounts they had opened using my stolen identity. Federal agents discovered that they had not only used my information to purchase the house, but had also opened several credit cards, a home equity line of credit, and an auto loan that I had never authorized or known about. The total amount of fraudulent debt created using your identity is approximately $1.2 million. Agent Rodriguez informed me during a debriefing session after the arrests. The mortgage represents the largest single fraudulent transaction, but they had been systematically using your credit profile for various purchases and financing over the past 8 months. The systematic nature of their identity theft scheme was much more extensive than I had initially realized. They had essentially created a parallel financial life using my credit and income qualifications, while expecting me to bear responsibility for all the debt they were accumulating through their fraudulent applications. The items seized during the search warrant execution painted a clear picture of the lifestyle they had been funding through identity theft. Expensive furniture, jewelry, electronics, and clothing were all purchased using credit accounts that had been opened with my stolen information. Their mortgage fraud had enabled not just housing, but an entire luxury lifestyle that was completely unsustainable based on their actual income. The federal grand jury returned indictments charging each family member with multiple felonies, including identity theft, mortgage fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and bank fraud. The charges carried potential prison sentences ranging from 5 to 25 years, depending on the specific counts and the defendant's criminal history. Dennis faced the most serious charges as the apparent ringleader of the fraud scheme. As the person who had initiated contact with mortgage brokers and coordinated the false documentation, he was charged with conspiracy, mortgage fraud, identity theft, and bank fraud. His potential sentence ranged from 15 to 25 years in federal prison. Sharon was charged with conspiracy, identity theft, and fraud for her role in providing false information during the mortgage application process, and for actively using credit accounts that had been opened with my stolen identity. Her potential sentence ranged from 10 to 15 years. Tyler and Justin were charged with conspiracy and fraud for their participation in the scheme and their use of benefits obtained through their parents' identity theft. As younger defendants with no prior criminal history, their potential sentences ranged from 5 to 10 years each. The federal prosecution moved quickly toward plea negotiations as my family's attorneys recognized that the evidence was overwhelming and that trials would likely result in maximum sentences rather than the reduced penalties available through cooperation and guilty pleas. Your family's attorneys have indicated that they want to negotiate plea agreements rather than proceed to trial, the federal prosecutor handling the case informed me. The evidence is so strong that trials would be exercises in futility that would only result in harsher sentences. The plea negotiation process revealed how completely my family's understanding of their situation had changed since their arrests. The people who had casually discussed their mortgage fraud as smart financial planning were now facing the reality that their crimes would result in federal prison sentences and permanent felony convictions. Dennis agreed to plead guilty to mortgage fraud and identity theft in exchange for a sentence recommendation of 12 years in federal prison, plus full restitution of all fraudulent charges. Sharon accepted a plea agreement for conspiracy and identity theft with a sentence recommendation of 8 years plus restitution obligations. Tyler and Justin both agreed to plead guilty to conspiracy charges, with sentence recommendations of 4 years each in federal prison. All 4 family members would also be required to pay restitution for the full amount of fraudulent debt, plus damages and investigation costs totaling approximately $1.4 million. But beyond the criminal consequences, the civil asset forfeiture process ensured that everything they had obtained through their fraud scheme would be seized and sold to provide restitution for their crimes. The house, furniture, vehicles, and personal property that had been purchased with fraudulent credit would all be liquidated through government auctions. The house that had been the centerpiece of their fraudulent lifestyle was seized immediately after their arrests and prepared for auction by the U.S. Marshals Service. The same beautiful home where they had planned to celebrate their success became government property that would be sold to provide restitution for their victims. The house will be auctioned next month with a starting bid of $750,000, Agent Rodriguez informed me. The proceeds will go toward victim restitution and investigation costs. Any remaining debt after the auction will be covered by wage garnishment during their prison sentences and probation periods. The federal asset forfeiture program ensured that I would be fully compensated for the fraudulent debt that had been created using my identity, while also sending a clear message that mortgage fraud results in the loss of everything obtained through criminal activity. Meanwhile, my own credit and financial situation was being completely restored through the Federal Victim Assistance Program. All fraudulent accounts were closed. All unauthorized debt was removed from my credit report. And I received compensation for the time and effort involved in resolving the identity theft consequences. Your credit score has been restored to its pre-fraud level, my attorney informed me 6 months after the arrests. All fraudulent debt has been removed from your credit report, and you'll receive additional compensation for damages related to the identity theft and fraud scheme. The professional consequences for my banking career were completely positive, rather than negative. My employer and industry colleagues were impressed by my professional handling of the fraud discovery and my cooperation with federal investigators. Rather than being seen as a liability, I was recognized as someone who had expertise in identifying and prosecuting financial crimes. Crystal's experience with mortgage fraud has made her an even more valuable asset to our lending department, my bank's regional manager said during my performance review. Her first-hand knowledge of fraud schemes and federal prosecution processes will help us better protect our customers and identify suspicious applications. 2 years after my family's arrests, they were all serving their federal prison sentences, while I had completely recovered from their identity theft and fraud scheme. The house they had purchased with my stolen identity had been sold at auction for $820,000, providing full restitution plus damages that compensated me for their crimes. Dennis was serving his 12-year sentence at a federal correctional facility in Texas, where he would remain until he was eligible for supervised release after serving 85% of his sentence. Sharon was serving her 8-year sentence at a federal women's facility in California. Tyler and Justin were both serving their 4-year sentences at different federal facilities and would be released on supervised probation in approximately 3 years. The restitution payments would continue long after their release from prison, ensuring that they would be financially responsible for their crimes for many years to come. Their felony convictions would also permanently affect their employment opportunities and financial access, creating long-term consequences that extended far beyond their prison sentences. But perhaps the most meaningful outcome was that their mortgage fraud prosecution had become a case study used by federal agents and prosecutors to educate others about family financial crimes and their consequences. Their elaborate scheme and dramatic arrests were featured in training materials that help investigators identify similar fraud patterns. Your family's case has become an important teaching tool, Agent Rodriguez told me during a follow-up interview. It demonstrates that family relationships don't provide protection from federal prosecution for serious financial crimes, and that mortgage fraud schemes ultimately destroy both finances and families. The case had also attracted attention from financial institutions and mortgage lenders who were interested in understanding how sophisticated fraud schemes operate and how they can better protect themselves and their customers from identity theft and mortgage fraud. I was invited to speak at banking conferences and federal law enforcement training sessions about identifying mortgage fraud and working with victims of family financial crimes. My experience had transformed from a personal betrayal into professional expertise that helped protect others from similar victimization. Have you ever had a traumatic experience become a source of strength and expertise that helped other people? That's exactly what happened as my family's mortgage fraud scheme became the foundation for education and prevention efforts that protected countless other families from similar crimes. Today, I continue working as a senior bank manager with enhanced responsibilities for fraud prevention and detection. The house that was purchased with my stolen identity has new owners who legitimately qualified for their mortgage, while my family serves their federal prison sentences and faces years of restitution obligations. The American dream that they tried to achieve through fraud and identity theft ultimately became a nightmare that destroyed their freedom and financial future. But their crimes also demonstrated that federal financial laws exist to protect victims and ensure that mortgage fraud carries serious consequences regardless of family relationships. If you're dealing with family members who have access to your personal information and who struggle with financial responsibility, please take steps to protect your identity and credit from potential fraud. Family relationships don't prevent financial crimes, and the people closest to you often have the information necessary to steal your identity. Monitor your credit regularly, protect your social security number and employment information, and never assume that family members will respect financial boundaries just because they're related to you. Identity theft within families is more common than most people realize, and the consequences can be devastating for both victims and perpetrators. The mortgage fraud that destroyed my family relationships also taught me valuable lessons about financial security, professional integrity, and the importance of cooperating with law enforcement when crimes are committed. Sometimes the people who claim to love you are the ones most likely to exploit your success for their own benefit. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share your experiences in the comments below. Have you ever discovered that family members were misusing your financial information or credit? How do you protect yourself from identity theft while maintaining family relationships? Your story might help someone else who's dealing with similar financial exploitation and fraud. Thank you for joining me on this journey of family betrayal, federal prosecution, and ultimately justice through appropriate legal consequences. Remember that your financial security and personal identity are worth protecting from anyone who would exploit them, even if those people are family members who claim to have your best interest at heart. See you in our next story here on Her Sweet Revenge.